All right. Let's rename me. So far we've got about 15 participants. I'm having some technical difficulties. I'm in a hotel in Georgia and the internet is not prime. So if somebody could go ahead and just let me know if you can actually hear me. You can see that there's like a Q&A and chat down at the bottom of the screen. If you can just let me know if you can hear me and see me. Great. That's that's really good to hear, because I've been battling this. Like an hour ago, I was just like, I better test this. I got a new computer, and then I found out that I've got brand new software and everything. So I had to download everything in the last minute, and the internet stinks. So I'm trying to like make a hotspot work on my. There we go. All right. All right, we're gonna give it a shot with this internet right here. It's 8 o'clock, so everybody should be here. That's going to be here. Some people might filter in. I'm going to try to make this work the best I possibly can. If I can't make the PowerPoint work for you, we'll make it work out. So the cool thing about this software is the fact that you can interact with me. You can ask me questions through the Q&A and stuff like that. Oh yeah, Kyle Jenkins from Connecticut. So yeah, I can see you guys and what you're not. I can't see you, but I can see what you're writing. So if you have any questions or things like that, or things kind of go awry with the video and stuff like that, let me know. All right. Let me go back over here. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Somebody give me something on a Q&A or the, let's see what, yeah, success, perfect. All right, without further ado, let's get started. As you guys know, my name is Miles Burghoff, aka Sonar. This is a webinar all about tournament tactics, and the webinar is presented by, as you can see, because you can actually see my next slides here. I'm sorry it's not in presenter's view, but it is presented by Navionics. You know, I've been working with Navionics for several years, and they've just been a great company to work with. And so they do a bunch of these webinars, so they're pretty awesome. This webinar is about tournament tactics. This is a subject that's really near and dear to me because I absolutely am ate up with tournament fishing. It's my favorite thing in the whole world, other than my wife and my family. I gotta absolutely throw that out there. But I mean, as far as my career goes, a career path, and my pastime, tournament fishing is where it's at. Really love the competition, and so you know, there's been, over the last few years, there's been some aha moments that I've had, and so that's kind of what prompted me to do this webinar and kind of you know, share the things that I've learned. You know, obviously this is all just stuff that you can loosely use to your advantage in your tournaments. I want to make sure that you take everything that I say with a grain of salt. Most of it is conceptual, so it's mostly just concepts. It's not exactly, I'm not telling you exactly what to do. It's just things that I've learned that have really helped me kind of look at things from the right perspective, which is tournament fishing is, it's all about that. Making sure that you're not, you know, paying attention to one certain thing, or you got to view tournament fishing as something that's not cut and dry, is what I'm trying to say. So we're going to be talking about practice preparation. That's actually another webinar. The next one's going to be on that entire subject, so we're only going to touch on a little bit of it. Practice preparation, fishing for a lake, because not every lake's different. Using your strengths, which is going to be a common subject throughout this webinar, which is a really important part of everything that I'm going to be talking about. So it's got its own section. Dock talk, we're going to be talking about that, how to use good dock talk and how to use bad dock talk, and to figure out which ones are good and bad. Single day versus multi-day events. And then we're also going to get into get your gear in gear. You know, take care of your tackle and it'll take care of you. So we're going to get into all that stuff, and then we're going to have a Q&A at the end. We're also going to be doing some giveaways throughout the webinar here. We've got Fitzgerald rods. They actually gave me some Fitzgerald cash here, $50. So we're going to be giving away 2 of these tonight. You can use it towards any of their rods. So it's awesome. And we got some Z-Man prize packages coming your way. So we'll do those at random. Let me just make sure that I check the Q&A. Mark, absolutely. I'm going to try to get you a copy of the slides. So anybody that wants to get a copy of these slides, send me an email. You can send it to sonar@sonarfishing.com. Pretty easy to remember. Send me an email. I'll shoot you over the slides. Of course, these are going to be general, so they will be helpful if you pay attention to them. So I'm going to go ahead and clear these. Just real quick. All right, so let's get started. Section 1, practice and preparation. Okay, again, I'm going to have another webinar. It's in April, and that one's going to be a really good one for you guys to join too. If you like this one, you're going to love that one, because it's super important to learn how to practice correctly and to prepare for not only practice but also the tournament. So we're going to be talking about weather watching, making a plan for spontaneity. Spontaneity is really important, kind of going with the flow, fishing the moment. It's super important in tournament fishing. The power of efficiency is another section. Always set the hook, goes against common the common practice, and then keeping it simple. All right, so let's start with weather watching. So out of all the things that I do for tournament preparation, it's probably watching the weather is the most important. It's absolutely, especially during the spring and fall periods. Those are the periods of the year that the weather is changing constantly, and I need to make sure that I know what kind of weather patterns have been prevalent. Okay, so first point there is weather patterns prior, not just during a tournament, are extremely important. An example of this is on the recent event on the Harris Chain, the Bassmaster Southern Open, first one of the year, was last month. And it was it was very different than I would have expected last year. I was really excited when I learned that the Open was going to be held on the Harris Chain in January, because generally it's in March when the spawn is on and everybody's just crammed in those canals. But once I heard it was in January, I was just like, this is going to be a pre-spawn deal. Not really the case. A little bit of the case, but not really the case. Because I was watching the weather 3 weeks in advance before I came from California to Florida. I watched that weather pattern and I realized that it was stable. It was warm, stable entirely. I actually watched it probably a couple months in advance, off and on, but it was entirely stable, real warm weather. And what I realized was that even though January is normally pre-spawn staging time, that these fish had been spawning all the way through October, November, December, in and out. They've been going in and out of the shallows, and so the fish were in all 3 phases of the spawn. Some of them were way out in the middle of the lake. Some of them were onshore spawning. There was a lot of big fish up shallow, but it wasn't a giant wave that you would see if the weather was cold, 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 all of a sudden week of warm weather. So paying attention to that, I knew that I could have some great offshore opportunities, and I found a great offshore spot that really carried me to a top 30 finish. And then I also had some shallow stuff. So paying attention to the weather patterns. So spring, and let's see if we got any questions. Okay, and you can ask me questions throughout if it pertains to the subject that I'm talking about at the moment. Bring it on. I like that. But if it's something that's kind of off subject, we'll wait until the end during the Q&A and we can get to that. Spring and fall, like I said, most important times of the year to pay attention to the weather. Summer and winter. Summer's always hot. You know, there's some rainy trends, there's some windy trends, and those are important too. But those are more short-term, factors that are important to pay attention to. In winter, the same thing. Obviously, if you get some warm weather and it's real stable, that's something to pay attention to. But generally, it's colder. It's a little bit more stable, even if it's real cold and rainy and such. So really pay attention during spring and fall. Monitor weather at least 3 weeks prior to an event. That's my basic rule. I kind of mentioned that before. 3 weeks is a really good period of time because that can kind of dictate what has happened, what's going to happen with the weather trend that's scheduled to happen during the event, and then you know where those fish are going. Okay, you know where they've been, you know what their habits are going to be towards the tournament, and that's going to help you stay with those fish and adjust. Stable weather means fronts will impact fishing more than constant fronts passing through. And what I mean by that is kind of the same thing that I mentioned in spring and fall fishing. Okay, if the weather is stable, we'll use Florida as a couple examples, but if it is nice and warm, nice and warm, nice and warm, all of a sudden you get in that 30, 40 degree range, the water temperature drops really quick. That is going to affect the fish much more adversely than a situation where you've got one front one weekend, the next weekend you got another front, and keep on having fronts. The fish are going to get used to that colder weather pattern much easier, and the fishing is actually probably going to be even better, even though it may be even colder, but it hasn't had a drastic change. So when you have those consistent weather patterns and then you have a disrupting cold front, that's something to pay attention to. But if you have cold front after cold front after cold front, that's that doesn't necessarily mean the fishing's going to be bad. Wind direction and intensity is just as important as temperature or precipitation. Okay, but the thing about wind direction and intensity is that it is a short-term factor that I pay attention to. Okay, it's not something that I pay attention to 3 weeks in advance. It's generally something that I'll start paying attention to a week prior to an event. Okay, because that period of time you're going to start. That's when you can start making decisions based on that weather pattern. Okay, so like Okeechobee, for instance. Okay, if you have a predominantly north wind and it's just pounding the south end of the lake, you're going to have some pretty tough fishing on the southern end of the lake. So you might want to adjust your pattern. But it's something like if you had a real bad wind like 3 weeks prior, it's not something I'd pay attention to. But in the heat, it's something that's very, very important. So we got something from a question from somebody. Do you find certain species to be less affected by fronts, and do you modify your plans accordingly? Really good question. So yes, absolutely. Spotted bass and smallmouth are less affected by fronts than largemouth are. Now it's different how they're affected for different lakes, and even largemouth can be different depending on what part of the country you're in and what strain of bass they are. If it is a Florida largemouth strain, it's going to be more affected by a cold front than a northern strain largemouth that you'd see in a lot of the lakes up north. But Florida strain are dispersed pretty evenly throughout the U.S. And when the front hits those fish, those Florida strain fish, they love warm water, the heat, sunny days. That's what they like. But when those fronts move through, those fish tend to shut down, and it tends to get really tough, and you have to slow down for those fish. The northern bass, I've had instances where we've had one of the worst cold fronts of the year, even in spring or the fall, and I'm still catching northern bass just as good as I did before the front. So northern bass aren't affected nearly as much. Hopefully that helped. All right, so let's move on to the next. I'm glad that this is working because I was really worried about it prior to this deal. So plan for spontaneity. This is so unbelievably important in my book. One thing that I've learned, and one thing that I've learned the hard way over the last few years, you've noticed, if you look at my tournament standings, I had kind of a rough patch in 2013 and 14, and it's because I was planning too much. In part, it was because I was planning too much prior to practice. You never want to go into an event thinking that, or just absolutely sure of what you're going to do, because most of the time, 95% of the time, that's going to fail you, okay? Because you're going to go out there with your blinders on, and you're just focused on one thing or one area. And that's not the way to fish a tournament. So rigidly adhered to plans prior to practice or after practice can be dangerous, especially when weather is changing. Okay, so if you have a plan, that you're going to use a rattle trap on Guntersville. You're gonna throw a lipless crankbait on Guntersville. You know exactly you're going to go over to Seabold and just go whale on them. But then the weather changes. Okay, and maybe the area gets muddier or something like that. It's just not working out. It's going to take you much longer to make that adjustment needed if you have your blinders on and you have a rigidly adhered to plan that you've been thinking of the entire drive up to Guntersville. So don't have a real rigid plan. Lower your expectations going into practice as far as techniques and fish habits will be most. As far as techniques and fish habits will be most prevalent. Okay, so what that means is don't really have too rigid of a plan when it comes to your techniques or what the fish are doing, because ultimately it's up to the fish as to what they want to eat and what they are actually going to be doing. And I find it time and time again where you're just like, man, this is exactly what they need to be doing. They have to be on the beds. Period. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And then I get there and it's like they've already been off the beds, or they're in a pre-spawn mode, and it's just and when I do that, I just don't make those adjustments correctly in time. So the one thing that I do as far as a plan is know what your start point is during practice. Where are you going to start? Okay, but don't plan too far in advance after that, because you want to go with the flow. You want to make sure that you remain lucid and able to make that next decision based on what's happening out there on the water. Okay, so know where you're going to start, know what launch ramp you're going to go to, have all your tackle ready, all your rods rigged up with all the different baits that you possibly can think of that these fish are going to eat, and then go to your first starting spot and then start analyzing it from there. Don't get disappointed if the first area that you've been thinking about the entire way, isn't working out. That's why you want to maintain a little bit more flexibility. Let's go back. So prepare yourself for plan B, C, D, and Z during practice to be your plan A during the tournament. Okay, that's the last point there. And this is a good example is the Harris chain. Or no, the Kissimmee chain is actually a better one. I fished a Ram Series Open last weekend or the weekend before that or something like that. And I went there. I only had one day of practice. I hadn't been out in the Harris or the Kissimmee chain in a couple years, and I decided to just go fish Cypress, fish offshore. And so I found 3 areas. I found one that I was just like, dude, I could catch 25 pounds here. Like, this could be really, really nuts. And then I had another spot. I'm just like, I can catch a bunch of little ones here. I can catch a limit easy. And then I had a wild card that was like, I caught a 3-pounder off, and I'm like, this looks pretty good, but I don't know what its potential is. Come the day of the tournament, because I didn't have too high of expectations, and I kind of allowed myself to you know, accept plan B, C, or D, I ended up realizing that the area that I thought the biggest fish were at wasn't working out for me after the front had passed. The little fish weren't working for me. I went back to that plan C spot, and that's where I caught all my fish and got a top 10 finish out of the 100 and something people that were fishing that event. So it was a really good example of staying flexible. We got another question. How long do you fish an area before you decide it's a good area and leave it alone till tournament time? That's actually a really good question. We're going to get into that in just a minute. So I'm going to hold off until we get to that slide. So power of efficiency is the next one. I'm really big on efficiency. I'm a little bit of a, you know, I pay attention to little details. I like that. But being efficient during your practice period is unbelievably essential, okay? You've got to be organized and ready for serious practice days out there on the water. The last thing that I want to do is show up to a tournament and the first practice day, I ruin half the day rigging up rods because I'm not prepared. You can still remain flexible and be prepared at the same time. I mean, I carry 25 rods with me, but if you carry, you know, 5 to 10 rods, you can still be prepared. You just tie up all the lures that you feel comfortable with, that you think that they're going to eat on that particular body of water. Have them ready to go. You don't want to do it during the tournament or or during the practice period or the night of after your first day of practice. So get them organized and be prepared for that first serious practice day. One thing that I've learned, and it may work different for other people, but this is something that I kind of took from Gerald Swindle after I started doing it on my own, and I felt that I was being lazy. Like I felt like that I wasn't doing my job if I wasn't out there from dark till dark. So, but I believe it's not about how long you spend on the water. It's about how you use your time out there. Okay. If you're efficient, if you have a practice day that's really efficient and it's only 6 hours long, I'd much rather have that efficient practice day than wear myself out for 12 hours out there on the water. Absolutely. No question about it. I would much rather be out there for a short period of time. And in fact, the 2 BFL super tournaments that I've won, one on Okeechobee and one on North Carolina Lake called High Rock, the 2 of those that I won, I actually got off the water during practice at noon on the final day, okay? And I knew exactly what I needed to do. So less can be more in those instances. But what you want to do is, and one of the reasons why I don't get out there super early in the morning, like I'll get out there when the sun just is coming up, and a lot of guys will already be on the water. But the thing is, you're passing up a lot of clues on your way to your first practice spot if you're getting in there really dark. You may pass up that pocket that has fish or birds working in the corner. You may not be able to see that in the darker time period of the day. And not only that, but the tournament, you're not fishing dark in the morning or in the evening. So why would you fish during that period of time just to squeeze out a couple more minutes? For me, it's all about being efficient on the water, not how much time. So don't beat a dead horse. Kind of the same subject. You don't want to just go out there and waste a bunch of time. If you're not feeling it, leave. Get off the water. Recoup. Work on gear. Do things of that sort. Keep your mind fresh. If you're somebody that it works for you staying out there all day, do that. But if you feel like you need to get off the water because you're starting to get all loopy, get off the water. Don't beat that dead horse, man. Reduce backtracking to an absolute minimum. What that means is a lot of times during practice, one of the least efficient uses of my practice day is where I'll use Guntersville as an example. I'll launch from Goose Pond, go up to Mud Creek, go back down to Goose Pond after practicing up near mud, and then want to go back up to someplace up, you know, in the upper reaches of the river because I just thought about it. Now, I'm not saying don't do that, because you got to follow your gut, but try to limit the amount of backtracking that you do throughout a tournament day or practice day, and especially a tournament day too. And launch close to where you practice. Launch in close to where you practice. I mean, that's kind of a common thing that people do. I don't necessarily do that all the time. I like to know the route that I'm going to take during a tournament. So sometimes I'll launch where the tournament's launched at, and then go up to the place where I'm primarily catching fish, or think that I'm going to go catch fish, to learn that route. But generally you want to stay close to where you're fishing. All right. Let's see if we got any more. Cool. We've got a bunch of people. So always set the hook. All right. This is one thing that people disagree with me on, and this is something that I completely believe in. Your job during practice is to gather all this data, so you can figure out what the fish are going to be doing, what the location is during the tournament, and kind of then pick up from there and try to make it work in your favor. By not setting the hook on a fish and shaking off every fish that bites, you are not getting any of the data that you need. Don't assume size or species. When people say that they go into an area they've never been before and they shook off 8 fish, I'm just like, all right, well, cool. Was it a mudfish? It could have been a mudfish. If you're fishing down in Florida, it could be a mudfish, it could be a gar, it could be anything. And then don't assume size. I'm like, what size was it? Was it, they're just like, hey, it was big. But was it a 4-pounder or a 10-pounder? Because the difference between a 4-pounder and a 10-pounder is huge at the scales, but not that big when you're trying to shake them off. They kind of feel the same. I know. I've tried to shake off both. And you need to know the condition and appearance of the bass. Okay, this is another really important factor. Setting the hook on a fish and bringing it into the boat, you can see what color it is, what shape it is, what condition it's in. Is it really beat up? Is it dark, skinny? That means that it's probably a resident fish. Maybe there's not a whole lot of fish that live there. There's just a few. But if it's football style, white, just gorgeous, healthy fish, maybe that's a schooler. That's probably a schooler, a group of fish that just moved in, and there's probably a lot more of them in that size class. So knowing what the condition of them are and what type of fish it is really important. So my rule in general, and this is something that's just very, I don't stick to it completely, but it's 2 by 10, okay? I'll set the hook on 2 fish in an area or doing a certain technique within 10 minutes of doing that technique. If I catch those 2 fish, I don't need to keep fishing. I just leave. I'll just completely leave after I catch those 2 fish by 10 minutes, okay? And people think that that's gonna hurt them in the tournament. Maybe, but if there was only 2 fish in that place, or those 2 fish hurt you during the tournament, you aren't in the right area to begin with, because you're looking for those big groups of fish, okay? Don't beat up your area, okay? Now this kind of goes against the always set the hook. When I say always set the hook, I don't mean it, okay? I just mean when you come to a new area and you're trying to figure things out and trying to see what kind of fish are in an area, you need to set the hook on a couple, okay? So look at them. You need to be able to see them, and then, leave. But the caveat to that is, if you are fishing in a lake that you know very well, and in a certain area you always catch fish under those conditions, you're just like, I know in this spot I'm going to catch a fish on that stump there. Don't fish it. Don't fish it. If it's a small little specific piece of cover or structure, don't fish it. Just fish it during the tournament. You can spend that amount of time to go check it out and see its potential. But for everything else, figure out, sorry, something came up. But for everything else, set the hook on a couple. See if we got any more questions. I had a question on this subject, so I'm gonna. So the question that I had earlier was, how long do you fish an area before you decided it's a good area and leave it alone till tournament time? Really good question. It depends on the situation. Generally, it's the 2x10 rule. If I catch 2 fish in 10 minutes, doing in one certain area or doing a certain technique, then I'll either switch techniques, or if I don't catch them 2x10, then I switch techniques or switch areas. But if I go into an area and I've got that feeling, I've got that that gut feeling that you're just like, there's fish in here, man. I'm gonna hammer them. And then you make a cast and catch one in the first couple minutes and it's a good one. Just leave, because your gut was telling you that it was a good area and you just confirmed it. Okay, that's the only information I need. I don't need to be reassured by catching a second fish. So follow your instincts. If you feel like you're gonna catch a fish in an area or that area is good and you do catch a fish in there, leave it alone. Just there's no need to beat it up, because you can figure it out during the tournament. Once the tournament starts, you can try it. If it doesn't work out, fine, and you can go on to your plan B. But that's kind of how I gauge it. Another question: will you pattern a type of area in practice or look to identify multiple patterns first? Let me think about that for a second. So I think the question is, do I look for locations or patterns first? And this is actually something we're going to cover in another slide, but I will mention that it depends on the body of water. There are some lakes, like Lake Okeechobee, for instance, that are location only. I'm only looking for location. I'm not looking for patterns. You can probably catch fish all around the lake on the same lure, but really there's only 5 different lures I use on Okeechobee anyways. So it's really up to the area. Okay, natural lakes and rivers, it's all area, location. On reservoirs, it's mostly there's a lot of reservoirs that are pattern lakes, like Table Rock, Bull Shoals, Smith Lake in Alabama. Those are all pattern lakes where you're probably not going to catch all of your fish off of one area, but you can move to run a certain pattern, like points and docks and stuff like that. So we'll move on to the next. Keep it simple. This is probably the most important slide in this section, and that's following your gut. I mean, really, fishing is all about, and this is something that I've really just started to grasp, and it's really improved my fishing. It's something that I used to do back when I didn't know any better. And I did extremely well in tournaments back, in my college days. And then I had 2 years where I was just like, I need to put a little bit more effort into, doing what people normally do to win on these events and try to win, using, techniques that I'm not as used to, or things that I'm just not used to doing. And, and I started failing. I started having really poor finishes because I was not following my gut. I was following somebody else's gut. And so it's really important to use the experience that you have as an angler, only the experience you have, not what you've read in a book, not what you've heard on a webinar, not what you've seen on YouTube. It's all about what you have experienced, and remember how, and just kind of let your instincts kind of run how you fish and how you adjust to the conditions. It's kind of a deep concept. It's kind of hard to explain. Don't try to do what you don't feel comfortable with. Okay, this is really important when it comes to keeping it simple, and it's something that just has to do with following your gut. If you are not a deep crankbait guy, don't try to go to Guntersville or Pickwick and try to throw a deep diving crankbait. You will get killed. Those guys know how to throw those crankbaits. But if you're a chatterbait guy, if you like fishing shallow, dirty water, there's probably not a lot of guys that could beat you at that game once you get dialed in on it. So focus on those things that you feel comfortable with, and forget about all the things that traditionally work but you're not comfortable with, because you will get hammered. And we'll talk about that more. Most of the times your first instinct is correct when it comes to location or baits, but sometimes it's just a little bit of adjustment. So if I go into an area, I'm just like, I think that this is going to be awesome. I don't catch anything with the first technique, change to another technique. And then maybe change to another technique if you really feel like you need to work a little bit more. And then after that, you know, just don't beat that dead horse anymore, man. Leave that sucker. That's when you need to kind of change up. All right, so for this next section, before we get into it, I'm going to try to do a giveaway. My original idea, it wasn't, oh yeah, it is going to work. All right, so I have a couple of numbers that I wrote down prior to this, and then you guys are on this list based on, you know, when you entered. So I'm going to pick one of those numbers. All right, and the first one is for a Fitzgerald rod, a cash, 50 bucks off of a fishing rod, and that's going to be sent to number 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh. Doesn't want to be nice to me. 5, 6, 7. Keith Leduc. Keith, if you're listening, if you could send me an email to sonar@sonarfishing.com, you got the $50 Fitzgerald cash. Congrats. So I'm going to send this to you right afterwards. So thank you. So I'm going to write that down real quick. Try not to make this a real long presentation, but so Keith. I know I murdered that name. Ludke. Keith Ludke. Okay, something like that. Congrats. Okay, fishing for a lake. Okay, we're going to talk about limit lake or big bag lake, structure versus cover, fast and furious, or is it a grinder? Okay, first one, limit or big bag lake. Okay, this is a really important factor to keep in mind when you're getting ready for a tournament and trying to figure out your game plan during the tournament. You know, most people want to catch a limit, makes them feel good, makes them want to, you know, it makes them, you know, feel like, oh man, I got 5 fish, I got my limit, now I can go after the big ones. If you're at a lake like Okeechobee or, you know, the Kissimmee Chain or Gunnersville or something like that, you got to go for the big fish. You got to go for the big bites, because an 8 or 9 pound limit on Okeechobee or Gunnersville is not going to do anything for you. And getting a limit first may be taking the time away from the big bite that you could be getting. So I'm not a believer in going and catching a limit first for a lot of these lakes, but you got to know which lake that you're fishing. If you're fishing one of those lakes that regularly pumps out big bags, focus on the big bite more than catching a limit. Okay, have an area where you can go catch a limit. You know, not necessarily a limit, but fill a limit. But at the end of the day, it's the big bites that are going to get it. But on the other side of the spectrum, if you're fishing a lake that is known for small limits, lightweight, you know, winning weights, then yeah, a limit may be the best thing for you. So that's when you want to go for that limit. So you got to know which lake you're talking about. Example is Okeechobee versus Lake Norman. Okeechobee, big bags. You got to have that 17 to 22 pound bag per day to have hopes for winning a multi-day event. But during Lake Norman events, 8, 9, 10 pounds is it keeps you in it. it keeps you in the game. So it's all about catching a limit on those lakes. So know which one it is and then adjust accordingly. But don't get stuck in that mindset that you have to go catch a limit. Okay, that is going to defeat you in a lot of cases. Okay, you're going to come back with that small limit because that big bite was in the morning. Not all the time, but sometimes. So don't be afraid to focus on big fish first. Okay, no more questions. Structure versus cover. Knowing when fish focus on structure versus cover is very important. I've talked about this on some of the other webinars that I've done. And the difference is between natural lakes and rivers versus reservoirs, okay, man-made lakes. On natural lakes and rivers, for whatever reason, probably because it's the cover's more prevalent, fish tend to focus more on the cover rather than the structure that the cover is around. Okay, so for example, on Okeechobee, there may be a really good-looking channel, drop, or that somebody like dug out or something like that, and there might not be a single fish in it because the fish are more focused on that grass mat that's out in the middle of nowhere and just like this flat, in 2 foot of water. It doesn't make any sense, but those fish love that cover. And on natural lakes, that is so common that the fish tend to focus on the cover. But when you find the prime cover, the best cover, and then you find that cover on top of some type of structure change that makes it even more valuable, that's when you start getting the real big bags and start doing very well. But don't always pay attention to structure contours. You really don't even need to look at the contours for fishing on some of those real shallow natural lakes and rivers too. It's mostly about the cover and the area and the water quality. But on reservoirs, it's the exact opposite. On many reservoirs, and I'm not saying every single one. You look at Guntersville, and it fishes more like a river and a natural lake than a reservoir sometimes, because it has a lot of grass in it. But on reservoirs that don't have a whole lot of cover, the fish aren't attracted to the cover. They're using the structure as their kind of migration routes and their holding spots, but they look for the cover on top of the structure. So you got to first find the good structure, and then you find the good cover on top of that, and then you'll do well. So that's something that you need to pay attention to and adjust to your game plan for a tournament, because you don't want to be that guy that gets stuck fishing, the rim canal in Okeechobee just because it has really good contour lines. Sometimes the rim ditch works out really well, but most of the time you're chasing ghosts. And it can be really tough unless the lake is all the way down. And the same thing goes for a reservoir. You could find the most perfect looking flooded cover, but if it doesn't have good structure around it, it's just not the kind of area that reservoir fish like, they're not going to be there. All right. Fast and furious or a grinder? So this again relates to the type of lake. Is it a lake that if things are going to happen, is it going to happen really quick? Is it going to be one area where you're going to catch 20 pounds? Is that what the kind of lake that you're looking for? Like Guntersville, most of the time it looked like the FLW tour was really tough there this last week. But generally, if you're fishing Guntersville, you're going to know if you're on a good spot at the right time pretty quick. It's going to be fast and furious. You're going to show up, throw that rattle trap out there, throw that swim bait, whatever you're throwing, and you're going to start catching fish pretty quick. And there's some lakes that are like that. Okeechobee can be like that too. It's in no way am I saying that that's how it's always going to be on those lakes, but you got to know how those lakes are fishing at certain times. Are they fishing fast, or are they going to be a grinder? Is it going to be like you catch one here and you got to work 5 more spots until you get your other bite? Okay, so and this is important to remember, because when lakes are fishing good, you shouldn't have to wait too long to get bit, and so that'll help you make those adjustments quicker. So if you're on a lake that you should be getting bit quick, that you don't need to be beating a dead horse. You need to move on to the next spot. on tougher lakes, you know, persistence and patience can make the difference. So you need to know when to be patient and when to be impatient is what I'm trying to say. So keep that in mind, because you need to make split-second decisions based on what's happening at the moment. Okay. Got another section here, so I'm going to give we've got 3 more prizes to give away. This time we're going to do a Z-Man prize package. So whoever gets the or you know, whoever gets this, Z-Man's going to send it directly to you, and so we'll go. It is actually 19. So let's see who is 19. Um, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Mitch. All right, Mitch, you got it. All right, he's a buddy of mine. I'm gonna he was number 19. I swear I'm doing these at random, the numbers that I picked before the thing showed up. But Mitch, you're gonna get some Z-Man stuff. I'm gonna send it to you. Thanks, buddy. And we'll go to the next. So using your strengths. This is where we start getting. This is the deep stuff. This is the meat, man. Don't let them beat you. Okay, that's one thing we're going to talk about. Building the right strengths is another really important thing, and knowing your limits. Okay, don't let them beat you. All right. If competing correctly, the only thing you are competing against is the fish. Okay. I got a question here. Oh, you're welcome, Mitch. All right. So again, if you're competing correctly, the only thing you're competing against is the fish. Okay. Think of it this way. A lot of people say on, you know, the Elite Series or the Tour, you know, if they have a bad day, and I'm not putting anybody down, but they say, you know, these guys are so good. You gotta catch them all the time. I mean, they're so hard to beat, these guys. And yeah, those guys are, you know, there's always somebody going to catch them, but there's really not that big of a difference between the weights in those and say the opens. But you know, when you start getting to other tournaments, yeah, there is a difference. But to me, you're fishing against the fish. But the only way that you're going to be fishing against somebody else is if you try to use their strengths to catch fish. Okay, that is when you're going to start trying to compete with somebody else. But if you really just allow yourself to use your strengths in tournament fishing, you're the one that's going to have to be beat. Okay, in that arena, you're the best at that. It may not win the event, but if you have to fish something you're not comfortable with, you're probably not going to win the event doing that. So so don't bring a knife to a gunfight, and that just simply means don't bring your D game, the thing that you're not comfortable with, to somebody that's their A game. For instance, the Tennessee River, man, I struggled out there for the longest time on Guntersville because I was trying to throw those big deep diving crankbaits. I was trying to do all this swim bait stuff that everybody does, fish the bridges, and it just frustrated me because I was doing terrible in some of those tournaments because I just didn't get it. I was competing against the best on the Tennessee River, and I was trying to do what they do best, and I sucked. I mean, I was terrible. And then once I started focusing on the things that I enjoy doing and I'm really good at, even though they don't get as much coverage or you know, news, and you don't hear about those techniques like flipping up shallow, I was starting to really, really do well. And I turned everything around because I focused on my strengths. And so that's really important to remember. If you try to compete against the best at a certain technique you are not an expert at, you will lose. That's, I mean, not always. I mean, you always read about that one guy that's just like, I never picked up this crankbait before. You know, I'm not a crankbait guy, but I won off of it. You know, he got lucky, found the right area. And so it can happen. But what I'm trying to say is embrace your strengths, man. Use the things that really that you know the best, because then people are competing against you, okay? And you're only competing against a fish. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so the right strengths. So which strengths do you need to have to do well in tournaments all across the country and be real flexible? Okay, do you want to have a wacky rig strength? Probably not. It's great for certain conditions. If you have clear water, it's great, but it's probably not where you want to be. Like, that's your strongest technique, because you might get hurt. So you want to become strong at winning techniques, okay? The winning techniques are flipping, pitching, punching, deep crankbaits, chatterbaits as of late, and a couple other ones, okay? So you look at the tournament trends, pick out a couple of those techniques that you like the most. Like, I'm a flipping guy, I'm a chatterbait guy. I don't like throwing deep crankbaits, so I don't do it during tournaments anymore, because I lost too much money doing it. So I focus on those things that are winning techniques you see a lot of guys winning with, and I get better at that. And then I start fostering the other techniques that tend to help you catch a limit, like the Ned rig, finesse techniques. Like, the wacky rig is good to be strong at in certain circumstances. So be versatile, but have those strengths that are winning strengths to push you to that final day and hopefully win. And one thing that I'm a real big proponent of is becoming strong at choosing baits, but not put all your faith in the baits themselves. I hear people say, I have a confidence bait. Like, this is the bait that I put on all the time. Like, this crankbait, whenever I put it on, it's going to catch them. Well, he tells me that the morning he gets in my boat, and then in the afternoon, he's just like, man, I can't believe it. I've never not caught a fish on this thing. And he threw it all day. I've had co-anglers do that before, and I've been a co-angler when the guy did that. And so you need to have confidence and become strong at choosing a bait selection instead of having confidence in that one bait. Okay, you never want to put confidence in an object. You want to have confidence in yourself and enable yourself to make the right choice. And this is all concepts you can use in just regular fishing too. This isn't just tournament fishing. Become strong at the techniques on both sides of the spectrum. Okay, so for instance, flipping and pitching. That's far right. It's the far right-hand side. And then drop shot, the far left. I don't like the drop shot. I like the Ned rig and things of that sort. So, but get good at power fishing techniques, and get good at something that is a finesse tactic. That way you can really hedge your bets and come out on top when you need to be a little bit more versatile. Okay, we've got some questions. How long do you give yourself to learn a technique before you say to yourself, I do not do this well? Okay, number one, when I'm learning a new technique, I never do it at a time that I don't know if the fish will bite it. I only go when the fish are eating it. Okay, because if I go out there when I throwing a drop shot and it's muddy and the fish, there's no way the fish could ever find it, I'm never gonna love the drop shot. But if I go out there when they're really eating it, that's when I'll start getting confidence, and then you can kind of build upon that, and you'll start fishing tougher days and learn when you can and can't use that bait. But I would say if you don't like something, you just don't like the way it feels when you're using that technique, and you just don't have a whole lot of confidence over an extended period of time, just keep it in the back of your mind. I'm that way with a drop shot and a deep diving crankbait. Deep diving crankbait I like a lot more than I like a drop shot. And I grew up in California, and I don't like a drop shot. I don't like the feel of it. I just don't feel like I get it, unless I'm fishing like up at the Great Lakes fishing for smallmouth. Then it's a lot of fun. But in general, you won't see me picking it up during a tournament the majority of the time. So it depends on how long you give yourself. But I would say Do it for a little bit, but if you don't feel comfortable with it, focus on something else that has kind of the same, does the same thing. Okay. All right. Let's see. We got a couple questions I want to go through real quick. Let's finish up this slide. Versatility gets you to the finish line. The right strength will help you cross that finish line. Okay, being versatile is very good. If you have good skill sets on both sides of the spectrum, you're going to be able to make that final day. And then hopefully your strengths, the things that you're really confident in, and you found areas that work with those strengths. That's when you cross that finish line, you win those tournaments, or at least get really close to it. Finally, know your limits. This one's kind of hard to explain. Don't try to do something you're not comfortable with. We've pretty much beat that one to death. If you don't think you can make something happen, you probably won't. Don't try to do something that you don't think that you can do, okay? I'm not saying give up. I'm just saying in the heat of the moment, you don't have time to be in an area during the tournament while the clock is ticking and you're just like, man, I just hate this area. I don't think I'm going to catch them, because you're probably right. You're probably going to stink in that area. You're not going to catch them. I've had that situation a lot. And you got to just know your limits. Know when it is time to say, I got to do something else. Go do something that makes me feel good, comfortable. Okay, dock talk. We'll go through this one pretty quick. Good versus bad dock talk. Dock talk is, in general, pretty bad. I don't like dock talk. I don't do a whole lot of calling around and research on a lake, secondhand research on a lake. It just doesn't work for me. It may work for some people, like some people get waypoints and stuff like that. I don't do that because I don't feel comfortable doing that. It's never really worked for me. I always do my best when I'm just out there, just going with the flow. But it's really important to learn the difference between good and bad dock talk, because you're gonna hear it. You're gonna be around it. People are gonna talk to you, and you need to be able to just kind of roll your eyes at some, and then just perk up and be like, that's important to others. And usually the most valuable information is in between the lines, the things that they're not exactly saying, but they are telling you. Specific information is usually bad and misleading. Okay, I never ask somebody about a specific location unless it's like somebody that's like I've known for a long time. I've fished with them. They have the same style as me, and they have the same kind of mindset. Then I have like one or two people that are like that. Then I can call them and just be like, hey, what's going on? What kind of patterns are working? But generally, I try to stay away from specific information. General pattern and location info can be really helpful. For instance, like on some of these Florida lakes, knowing which lake in a chain of lakes that's fishing good is really, really important. Harris chain, Kissimmee chain, really important. Knowing what part of the lake on Smith Lake is fishing best, which creek arm, really super important. So that's general information that you can use to your advantage. What type of pattern are the fish in right now? Are they offshore? Are they shallow? That sort of thing. The circumstances that led to somebody's success or failure likely can't be duplicated by you. That's why dock talk is so it's just so poisonous, man. It is not a good thing a lot of the time, because like you'll be on the phone with a buddy that you don't necessarily fish the same, and he's like killing it, and then you're dying inside because you're just like, oh man, what am I doing wrong? Like maybe I need to go try that. And then you go try doing exactly what he did, and then you suck even more. You're not catching anything, and it's because the situation that he's in, he might be on the spot, like the exact spot, making the exact cast, and you wouldn't know that. You'd think it's just a general pattern. So it's really important to remember that trying to duplicate something that somebody else is doing, I mean, maybe they're shaking the worm different or cranking that chatterbait in different. It's usually something very subtle that you can't. How many times have you been beat by somebody from the back of the boat, or you're killing it from the front of the boat and they can't catch anything, and they're 20 feet away from you? It's the same exact thing. Why would you want to waste your time doing something that somebody else is being successful at, if they're fishing a completely different part of the lake? So that's just my thoughts on that. Got a question. So I got a question from Steve. I'm going to go ahead and answer it at the end during the Q&A, because it's not exactly what we're talking about right now. But good question, man. I'm gonna get to that afterwards. But thank you for joining in, even if it is late. In fact, this presentation almost didn't happen because the internet sucks. Single day versus multi-day event, practice time, planning for the final day, diversification. Practice time. Over practicing can be harmful. Remember, keep things simple. Fishing is simple. It is all instinctual. It is not about what you know. It's what you're feeling and what your gut is telling you. So over practicing can be really, really unbeneficial. And an example of this is the Arkansas River, the first Central Open last year. I over practiced. I practiced for like 7 or 8 days. I was camping out at this place way up the Verdigris River, up 2 locks from where we were launching. And I just really wanted to go out and have a fun time. But I found a spot that the first day of practice, I caught them really good there, like a giant bag for that lake. And then from then on, it started getting worse and worse. And then I finally ended up going to a different part of the river closer to the launch ramp, and found the spot that I should have stayed on. And it was exactly fit my strengths perfectly. I knew exactly what the fish were doing. I knew that I could catch between 13 and 16 pounds a day. But what do? Because I had too much practice, and I knew that I could catch possibly an 18-pound bag, and I had a late boat draw. I went 2 hours each way up the Verdigris, came back with 1 fish. The next day, I came back, fished the one spot that was really close to the launch ramp, caught almost 17 pounds, which was one of the biggest bags of the tournament. And it's all because I practiced too much. I had too much going on in my brain, and I made the wrong decision. So let me see. I gotta go. So I will get back to that. Single day events, I generally only practice 1 or 2 days. One day, if I'm doing 2 days, the first day I'm driving around trying to look at the lake, see how it's laying up. The second practice day will be the actual fishing. So I won't even really fish the first day. I'm looking for a really good area that I feel comfortable in. It looks really good. It's setting up right, and then I practice on the second day. But you don't need that much time. Okay, it's a single day event. You don't need a whole lot of areas. You need to focus yourself and pay attention to, or just keep focused on certain areas. Okay. Multiple day events between 3 and 5 days max. That's all I do. There's some guys that do really well with a long practice period, and I see that. I mean, I know guys that practice like 10 days for the Opens, and that, for me, that's like unbelievable. My best tournament last year in the Opens, I never had a tournament below 51st last year, and my best tournament was like 20s, and I only had really 2.5 days of practice because I had a wedding the day or the weekend before, and in California, and so I only got a couple of days of practice, and that was my best tournament because I kept things simple and I just kind of went with the flow. Preparing for the final day. In order to win, anticipating what you need to make the final day is key. Knowing what is in your area and what you need, like the weights that you need to make that final day, is really key. Because if you're fishing for 12 pounds in a situation where you need 18 pounds to make the final day, then you are just fishing to fail. You're it's not where you need to be. So you need to know what's going to carry you to that final day, and then practice for that ultimate weight. Like at the Harris chain, I found a ton of fish. I was catching a lot of fish in different areas, and I knew that I could catch a limit, but I needed that big bite area. I needed that 17-pound plus area, and I found 2 of them. And in the first day, I lost all my big fish. I had about 17 or 18 pounds that I lost. Second day, I caught almost 20 pounds, just right under, and I went up. But if I had just been focusing on those little fish and I didn't know what it was going to take to make that final day, I probably would have missed out on both of those big fish areas. Follow the weather patterns. Again, really important. Knowing what's going to happen on the final day is super important. That helps you prepare for where you need to fish, because if the fish are moving to an area based on the weather, you know, if it's been super sunny and they're ready to spawn, they're probably going to move away from that offshore spot and get shallow. So you want to prepare for that based on the weather. And should you save fish? My basic idea on that is, if you're fishing an area and they're all generally the same size, once you get a limit, leave. Okay. If you're catching, you know, constant 5-pounders, don't try to cull up another pound unless it's the final day. You know, don't try to cull up another couple ounces, because you need that. Go try to find a big fish somewhere else. That's my perspective on that. How long do you got a question here? How long do you let a spot rest when you see somebody else just pull off of that spot? Good question. Very. I'm not exactly. It depends. It depends on the situation. Like at the Harris chain, I was that person that needed to let it rest. Okay, I had an offshore spot that it seemed like every time I showed up, I'd catch 3 fish and they'd be good fish. And then after fishing for 30 minutes, I'd pretty much need to leave, and I'd leave for about an hour. If you leave an area for about an hour, those fish are going to settle down and really change their attitude. Show up again, hit them again, leave for another hour, do something else, and come back. But it really depends. All right. Oh. Diversification. I'm going to try to get through this as fast as possible. I know it's getting late, guys. I appreciate your time. Diversification. Always find patterns that will fare differently under different conditions. Example, again, the Harris chain tournament, because it's fresh in my mind. The Bassmaster Open. I had a offshore spot and I had a shallow spawning spot. Okay, those were places that the fish were leaving the shallow spot and they were going to the deep water spot. So I had 2 different patterns working that kind of worked with each other in different situations. So you want to diversify when it comes to, especially during the spring and the fall. During the summer and the winter, when it's stable, not as big of a deal because those fish generally aren't moving as much. But in the spring and in the fall, you want to make sure that you diversify. You have a spot that maybe the fish aren't necessarily there yet, but they're going to be there. You need to have a spot that they're already there during practice on the first day of the tournament, but they may not be there. They might be at the plan B spot. And have different areas in different parts of the lake, but don't spread your stuff too thin. That's really important. For single day events, I'm a big believer in just staying in one part of the lake and keeping your game plan very simple, but allow enough for spontaneity, okay, like the Kissimmee chain tournament. Okay, let's do another giveaway here, and this is number 8. Number 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, 6, 8. Frank Tolman. Frank Tolman, you won a gift card, Fitzgerald cash, $50 for a Fitzgerald rod Frank, if you can send me an email at sonarfishing.com, I will get that right to you. So let me write down your name. Congrats, man. I just started working with Fitzgerald this year. They're unbelievable. Awesome people, great rods, really super durable rods, which I like because I'm kind of tough on my gear sometimes. Good job, Frank. All right, get your gear in gear. We'll go through this one real quick. So to me, it's really important to keep your gear, you know, real pristine, perfect working order. We're going to talk about less is more. Tighten up, tech and check. Okay, less is more, especially for single day events. Especially for single day events, try to limit the amount of tackle you bring. I try to lighten up on tackle, make sure that I don't have redundancy in my soft plastics. Make sure that if I'm fishing Okeechobee, I'm not bringing deep diving crankbaits. You know, lighten up on it. Remove all unnecessary tackle. Make an essentials bag. One thing that I do on a regular basis is that after practice, I kind of have an idea of what I'm going to throw. So I take all the soft plastics and all the terminal tackle that I'm going to need, that I'm anticipating that I'm going to need, and I put it in a Ziploc bag. Okay, that's my quick draw Ziploc bag that I carry with me that I can just real quick grab what I need. All the rest of the tackle is still in the boat. So if I need to make an adjustment outside of that quick draw bag, I can still do that. But in general, I'm not digging around. I'm not making a bunch of noise, scaring the fish. You know, I've got that one bag that I carry with me. And generally, I keep my plastic stuck in Ziploc bags, you know, by type. Tighten up. I'm really big on even though there may be service crews available, maintain your boat yourself. Do it yourself. Nobody's going to do it better than you are. Because you care about the boat, you care about that cash. The service crews, I tell you what, they're unbelievable. So, but and no buts about it. I mean, but it's still important for you to know how to take care of it too. Tighten up all your fastener bolts on the jack plate, the trolling motor, power poles. All that stuff is really important. Even tighten up the screws behind your rub rail. Take that off. Just tighten up all those, especially if you're going to a lake that is known for rough weather. Tighten all your electrical fasteners, especially on the trolling motor. Always tighten those up, man. Tighten up those contact points, and make sure that there's no corrosion or anything like that. Remove the prop after each practice day and tournament day. I'm big on that. I always do that. I carry a torque wrench with me, a block, and I always take off that prop and check behind it because I've lost a lower unit because of line, and you can pick up line really quick, and it's really easy to take off the prop, check everything, lube it back up with some good marine grade lube, you know, lube up the splines and everything, and then reassemble it. It's super easy. It makes you feel more confident in your equipment, and you know that you don't have any line back there. Okay. Remove engine cowling and inspect for visible damage or potential damage. You know, that's really important. I change my lower unit fluid every other multi-day event. That's kind of obsessive, but I do it personally myself, so it doesn't cost much. And if you test lower unit fluid after 1 day after being replaced, after 1 day of hard running, it's totally changed the molecular structure of that lube. So it's you know, it's different. So I like to change it quite often. Check running lights, bilge pump, live well operation, all that. Keep everything tight and tidy, or yep, tight and tidy. And then tech and check. It's really important to update your Navionics cards, your mapping cards prior to practice. If using Navionics Plus, be sure to download Sonar charts for your lake. It's really important. It's something that you know, not a lot of people do. They have the best mapping card on the market, and then they don't use it to its full potential. And it's really easy. You just turn it on your unit. And if you have any questions about that, you can send me an email. Make sure that the sonar and GPS settings are adjusted for the fishery. That's always really important. Replace scale batteries and do a run through of scale operation, that sort of thing. It's really common sense stuff, but it's really important to be prepared. You know, maybe don't go out to dinner with the guys. Maybe stay back and work on your gear. It's really important. Okay, Q&A. Let's do a little bit of Q&A. For those of you that that may be leaving, hopefully everybody will stay for some Q&A. But for you, those of you that are leaving, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Before we get into this, I'm going to do the final giveaway, and it's going to be, all right, somebody call out a number. First person that calls out a number between 1 and 26. That may actually be a bad plan. Never mind. Nobody call it a number. I'm just gonna think it. Okay. Number is 22. I don't know who number 22 is. We're gonna check now. 8. 9, 10, 11, 12. Robin Allen, you got a Z-Man prize package. I'm gonna have that sent to you. Send me an email at sonar@sonarfishing.com and give me your address. I'm gonna get that out to you. The Z-Man prize package. All right, cool. Right on. Thank you very much to Z-Man and Fitzgerald Rods for handing those out. Two fantastic companies I've been working with. I mean, they're just awesome. So let's go over some of the Q&A that I've got so far. How do you let a rest, or how do you let a rest, or we already went over the spot resting one. How would you break apart a lake you have never fished before? Okay, this is actually a really good question, and it's very difficult to answer. But the one thing that I will say is, going with the same thing that we've been talking about, playing to your strengths. What I do is I always focus on the part of the lake that makes me feel comfortable. I'm a shallow water, dirty water, power fisherman. I like to fish in the upper reaches of a lake. If I'm going to a reservoir, I'm going to go up the creek, go up the river. I'm going to find the dirtiest water that has the best type of structure and cover, and that's where I'm going to start at. I'm going to try to play to my strengths first, and I'm going to start going down the list. If my strengths aren't working, I'm going to go down the list of my next best strength and my next best strength. So always start with what you feel comfortable with. Don't start with what traditionally wins, because everybody's starting there. Everybody's going to be working on you know, throwing a lipless crankbait on Guntersville. If you don't like throwing lipless crankbaits, just don't do it. Go find something else that you like to do. If you like fishing deep, clear water, go find deep, clear water. Find the clearest water you possibly can. And that's how I pick apart a lake. I start with my very best strength, and then I start going down the list to my next best strength, the next one after that, and it changes depending on the season. Like during the spring, obviously you're going to start in the backs of pockets where they're spawning and things of that sort. So you got to mix in the seasonal patterns, but always keeping in mind you're trying to focus on your strengths. Okay, so I've got Kyle. He says, could you go into detail about what the shape and color of the fish tell you about them? All right, so the shape and color of fish really do tell you a lot about, you know, the fish. More so the shape. The color can kind of be misleading. If I'm fishing an area that's, you know, pretty shallow, or, you know, it's shallow cover generally, and I catch a skinny, big-headed bass that just doesn't look all that healthy, it's kind of dark, it's more than likely a residential bass. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing, but generally residential bass, there's not a whole lot of them around. There's only a few in that area. They're kind of territorial, and there may not be a huge population of them. There may be enough for a single day tournament, you know, for a couple hours fishing in there, but it's not going to carry you through probably to the end of the event. Sometimes it does, but what you're looking for is really the groups of fish, the big schools of fish. And generally schooling fish are they kind of have that perfect, just textbook fat, belly and just, football style fish. Those are the fish that are moving into an area in a large group, and they're there's a lot of them. And so that's what I look for, is those schooling, perfect shaped footballs. And then after that, I start, hopefully I can follow them around the lake. The color can be a little bit misleading, because if a school of fish has been up shallow for a long period of time, they could be a darker color. But generally those fish that are in those schools that are just coming through an area, those are lighter colored fish. Offshore fish tend to be a little bit lighter colored. The lateral line usually isn't very pronounced. On some lakes it is, but generally you got that real light coloration to it, and it's got that good shape to it. So. Okay, so I got some questions from somebody, and I'm gonna answer these real quick. These were some questions sent to me prior. How do you prepare for a tournament on a lake you've never fished before? That's something we just talked about. How does your strategy different if the water is super clear versus super stained? My strategy is that I run away from what I don't feel comfortable with. Okay, if I'm fishing the southern end of the lake, close to the dam, and it's crystal clear, I'm going to find some stained water, some dirty water that I feel comfortable with. That's how I adjust my strategy. Now, if I'm forced to fish one clarity over another, if there's no other clarity of water in the lake, which is like impossible, then I have to rely on some of my secondary strengths that I have in the finesse category, like fishing a Ned rig. I absolutely love fishing a Ned rig. And so that's why I need to diversify as far as the techniques that I've learned over the years and the strengths that I have. And the next question is, do you find that bass spawn at different depths in lakes that are crystal clear versus those with murky water? Yeah, absolutely. The clearer the water, the deeper the fish can spawn, and the different species spawn at different depths. Spotted bass will spawn in 20 feet of water a lot of times. Smallmouth will spawn in deep water as well. Largemouth, if the water's clear, they'll spawn as long as there's light penetration and those eggs can be incubated. Then they'll spawn in deeper water. And yeah, they I think you mentioned in the email, you were wondering if largemouth will spawn on those big large flats that are considered offshore, but it's still only like 5 feet. Absolutely, they'll do that as long as it's got good bottom composition and the eggs are incubated. It's all good, man. Thank you guys so much for being here. Appreciate it. All right, really good question from Adam. My son will start fishing with his high school fishing team. How would you recommend keeping him from getting frustrated? The best thing that I can say to help him from is staying fresh, confident, having fun, which is the entire point. If you're having fun, you're winning tournaments. You're getting checks, okay? If you're having a bad time, it's because you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing, or you're losing fish, which I know full well in the last couple events. But tell him that he has to just go out there and fish what he loves to fish, what I've been talking about the entire time. If he loves to go flipping and pitching, or he loves throwing a chatterbait, or loves any type of certain technique, have him go do that. Just tell him, have confidence in yourself and go fish that technique, because you're going to have a good time doing it. You know that technique better than most people do, and he's probably going to succeed. So I would say, if somebody is using their strengths, it's very, very difficult to get frustrated with that. The only thing that can frustrate you is losing fish, because sticking with your strengths, that's how you're going to do better in general. Just remember, I mean, you look at all the greats out there, Denny Brauer, Kevin Van Dam, you know, there all these different fishermen have strengths in certain arenas. Some of them are more versatile than others, like Gerald Swindle. But you know, like Denny Brauer, he's the king of flipping and pitching. That's when he wins tournaments. But he still stays consistent with that technique in places that you wouldn't expect a flipper or pitcher to be very good at. So it's just, you don't become great by doing what other people do. You become great and you start winning tournaments by doing what you want to do. So all the best tournaments that I've had, I did it based on what I wanted to do, not what I was supposed to do. So just a thought there. Do you ever do a class on setup and reading your Lowrance unit? Yeah, I mean, I'm always available to help out with those sort of things. If you live, you know, close to Florida, I do tutorials and things like that, you know, in person. So if you want to send me an email at sonar@sonarfishing.com, I can maybe help you out there. Mark, thank you for coming, man. With respect to time management, what is your approach through a day? That really depends on the day. It really does. It really depends on what I'm feeling at a certain time. You know, if I feel like I need to continue working an area, I'm going to do that. Yeah, I would love to give you a straightforward answer, but you've got to kind of go with the flow with that one. But you want to make sure that you're always keeping time management and being efficient at the first and foremost. So you don't want to be doing things that are reducing the amount of casts that you can put in a day. Do you find patterns affected at all when the water levels are excessively low or flooding? Yeah, absolutely. You know, there's every lake, you know, is different depending on the water level. You know, some more extreme than others, depending on how deep they are. You know, Okeechobee, for instance, when it's low, you can't even get close to the grass. Like back in 2006, 2007, it was like you're fishing hundreds of yards away from the grass because you can't even make it to the grass line. That's how low it was. So, and those fish were offshore, you know, so it depends on the lake and the conditions, but generally when the water is low, those fish tend to, you know, be further offshore or, you know, a little bit deeper. And then when it's high, excessively high, it's, you know, those fish follow that high water. But I will mention this, when it's really high, don't go to those areas where the water floods way back into an area. Okay, like you're fishing like tables and stuff and campsites and you know, fire pits and stuff like that. Don't fish in those areas. Fish in the areas where the fish can't go very far. Like maybe there's like a bank that stops and those fish can't go that far. That's the area that you're going to be able to pick apart a lot better, and the fish aren't going to be able to run away from you or, you know, just spread out too much. So anonymous viewer asks, spotted bass, how do you locate the bigger ones specifically on a lake like Orville? That's a tough one. I'm gonna say that I'm not a spotted bass expert, so I'm not gonna mislead you, but what I can say is that bigger spotted bass are generally grouped up by size. When I've experienced, you know, the best spotted bass fishing, so it's all about finding, you know, once you get one good bite, fish that area more. So it really just takes time for you to find those bigger fish, and a lot of times the big fish are suspended, which is the most frustrating way to catch fish. And bigger fish do tend to suspend quite a bit. So I'd try, you know, I try baits like, you know, Alabama rig, things of that sort that can catch those suspended fish pretty easily. But that's all I have to say about that. Let's see who else is on chat. All right, so we got some people on chat been neglecting here. Cold, muddy water out here in Cali with all the rain. Any help you can give? Cold, muddy water. Yeah, just that's never good. Depends on which lakes you're talking about. If it's Clear Lake, I would fish. I'd fish shallow water where the fish are always generally shallow in that area and don't have anywhere else to go, and I'd slow down. I'd probably use a chatterbait, honestly. I'd just really just slow roll that thing, let it thump through all that grass. But it really depends on the situation. But cold, muddy water is generally the worst enemy of bass fishermen, and it gets really, really tough. So another question, a really good question. You're not doing well in multi-day events, though. How do you keep your mind in the right place? So I had a couple of multi-day events. I mentioned both of them that were really frustrating. And the first one was last year, Arkansas River, where I had one fish the first day, and I was like 178th place. And then the next day I caught that big bag and went all the way up to 51st, kind of saved the tournament a little bit. I mean, I didn't make a check, which sucked. And then the Open just recently on the Harris chain, first day I had only like 8 pounds, just over 8 pounds. And I had lost like 17 or 18 pounds, which like crushed me. And then the next day I caught like 20 pounds. And the thing is, like, if you have a bad day, if you're not doing well, go have fun. Like, do what there's no way to make up ground. You'll hardly ever make up ground in a tournament where you're doing bad at if you run away from your strengths. There's no way that you can, like, you can't say, okay, those guys are catching them, on a drop shot down by the dam, but I don't know how to throw a drop shot. Don't do that. Go fish your extreme strength. Like, if you love flipping and pitching, and your best fishing has been like throwing a spinner bait or a shallow diving crankbait, go find some flipping cover. Go have a fun day in an area that there's some fish, that you found some fish during practice. Just fish your strengths. Just fish something you feel comfortable with, because you're going to continue being down on yourself if you're fishing something you don't like to do. Always you're going to be down on yourself, and it's going to suck, because I know how that feels. And instead of changing different locations and what the second day on the Open on Harris, I just fished the same areas as I did before, but I went out there with the mindset of, okay, I can fail today, but I'm going to have a good day. And that sounds like all, goody two shoes, and like, I don't know. There's something to be said about a positive attitude, and it's not just blowing smoke up your what. It's really, truly, you got to go out there and have fun, because if you're not having fun, you're probably not going to do very good. I don't know Kentucky Lake all that well, Steve. The question is tips on specific areas on Kentucky Lake last of March, 1st of April. I can tell you right now that I would fish in the back if I was a guy that liked fishing shallow, which I absolutely am. I'd be fishing the backs of the creeks, flipping the brush, because that time of year the brush bite can be really good. I'm not much of an offshore guy, so that depends on what you like to do. But I don't have. I've only fished there once, so I don't have a lot of experience with it. All right, who else? Man, we still got 19 people hanging out. I like this. It's awesome. Anybody else? So somebody tell me, did you like the webinar? At least tell me that. You can be critical. You can say no. It would suck if nobody could hear me the entire time because of the. Thank you, Adam. I appreciate it. I'm glad that you liked it. I enjoy talking to you guys, even though it's just a screen. Frank, thank you very much. You won something, didn't you? Right on. Don't forget to send me an email. Those guys got Keith, Mitch. I already got your information. Frank Tolman and Robin Allen. We've got you some gear from Z-Man and Fitzgerald Rods. You're welcome, Mark. Thank you. Anybody else? I'll be here all night. Ah, Mitch, always wanting pictures. You're a picture learner. No, I'm just kidding. Hey, by the way, Katie absolutely loves the beef, man. Thank you very much. I love the beef. Mitch is actually one of my sponsors. He owns L&M Grass Fed out of Modesto, California. Awesome group of people. Some of the best, meat products that you'll ever have. So if you guys are in the market for some grass-fed meat, he's the man. Mitch, I'm gonna, because I was having technical difficulties before this, I was actually gonna put all the photos and stuff. So I kind of failed at that, but I will. If you have specific questions, you have my number. You're welcome, Chris. Thank you. Thank you, Seb. Steve, dude, it's all about confidence, man. I'm telling you, it may sound, like it's like a self-help book, but it's so true. It's not even just confidence; it's just enjoying it. When you're enjoying something, you're performing at your best, in my opinion. Not necessarily all the time, but usually. Yep, next one is in April. I need to figure out the exact date, but keep on my Facebook page, my Instagram, and yeah, I'll let you guys know exactly what the dates are for that. So. Robin, I didn't pick you for the gear, but you're very welcome. I just picked some random numbers at the beginning of the before the webinar, and you were it. And you're lucky that there wasn't 27 guys, because I actually had 27 as the number, but then I had to switch it. All right, it looks like everybody's pretty much got their questions answered, and everybody probably wants to go to bed. So thank you guys. I do, because I'm on the East Coast. Everybody else is on the West Coast probably. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Attend the next webinar. I think you're going to like that one. That one's on practice. Thank you very much, and I'll see you around. Keep following me. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.